Hi everyone, so today I'm going to talk about Chartres Cathedral, and this is the view in your notebook. There are several slides for this one, just because there's a lot of different parts to label. So I'll switch back and forth between this view probably and with the PowerPoint pictures. So Chartres Cathedral is in France. This is a part of the Gothic movement that you read about. So we just finished looking at the Church of St. Foy, which was a Romanesque cathedral, and now this is a Gothic cathedral. So we're going to go through different steps here. Let's start with just some basic info that you can fill in right here. So this first one, the Gothic style developed around Paris and spread out from there. Chartres became famous for holding an important relic, which was Mary's tunic. So Mary, the mother of Jesus, they said that they had a tunic that belonged to her in this church. So just like we learned about the importance of pilgrimages to see relics, this was another important site. The cathedral would have been part of a complex that included a school, a bishop's palace, and a hospital. The original church burned down in 1194 and was rebuilt in the Gothic style. One of the other parts we're going to look at is called the west facade. The west facade is also called the royal portal because it was used for important people to enter, like bishops. And it's divided into three major sections. So the middle section right here has this round window that's called a rose window. And then it has windows underneath that are called lancet windows. And lancet is Lancet. And lancet are just like these high, narrow, pointed windows. This particular one I'll show you in a minute. Well, I'll show you the Gallery of the Kings right here. So let me switch to the PowerPoint and we'll fill in this section and then we'll move on and fill in the plan on the next slide as well. Okay, so here is Chartres from the outside. So this is typical of a Gothic style structure. One of the things on that thing where it says, what are these? They are called flying buttresses, And you can see them along the side here. So one of the goals of Gothic architecture was to open up the inside of the church. So like when we looked at the Church of St. Foy, it had these huge piers inside. It was pretty dark. And like these huge stone piers really like dominate everything. And so they wanted to come up with another way to support the church. And so what flying buttresses did is it put the supports on the outside of the church. So the force of this whole thing should cause it to like come down and go outward. And so what the flying buttresses do is they kind of push it back in so it stays upright. Here's another view. So you can see these things on the sides here are the buttresses. And here's a picture of like what this actually looks like. And when we are looking at the church, this is like a side angle. Here's the nave that you could actually, like if you were a person, you'd be way down here walking through. Here's the piers and here's the side aisle. And then we're going to talk about these parts here, the clerestory, the triforium, and the nave arcade. And then the flying buttresses go up to hold and add support to the walls of the church. Here's another view. Okay, let's talk about the plan, and it gives you some parts to label. So the central area where the congregation would be is called the nave. So this is just the open area right here. The side aisles are on either side. So the side aisles, remember, would allow people to move throughout the church without disrupting what's going on in the center. So in this case, if people wanted to go back here, they could walk up the side aisle and go around and not even ever enter into the nave and disturb things. Here's the apse. So that is the semicircle area, and that directs people's attention to the front of the church, which is where the altar would usually be and where the priest would usually be conducting the mass. Behind the apse is an ambulatory. that allows people to walk behind the altar to visit these sections, which are called radiating chapels. Gothic churches also have this regular repeating pattern. So you can see here how it's divided into rectangles. Those are called rectangular bays, and we'll see that when we look at the pictures in a minute. But the idea of a Gothic church is partially that it has like these repeating rectangular shapes. And then we're also going to see this crisscross areas. So like here how it crisscrosses over and over. Those are called ribbed vaults. Ribbed vaults. And that'll make more sense in a minute. But remember the Church of St. Foy, how it had just like round arches. These you're going to see cross each other and kind of look like ribs. And so that's why they've given it that name. Up here, I said I would mention, you don't have to write this down, but you're going to see a lot of references in this church to kings and queens. And this church was partially funded by the kings and queens of France. And so what they tried to do was associate themselves as kings and queens of France with kings and queens of the Old Testament. So we see like a lot of Old Testament kings, there's statues of them here to kind of like associate the kings and queens of France with these other religious figures. All right, now we're going to move on to the west facade portal, also called the royal portal. So you can see there's a series of 3 doorways, and they have a lot of different sculpture, relief sculpture within them. One of the terms on the vocabulary is archivolts. Archivolts are these like semicircle areas that surround the main tympanum right here. And you can see the archivolts here are just like covered in sculptures of their own. There's so much sculpture here to delve into. So let's start with the one that says central tympanum. In the central tympanum, Christ is in the center in a mandorla. Remember, a mandorla is like a football shape or like a pointed oval. And he's depicted in hierarchical proportion because he's much bigger than all the other figures we see here. The symbols of the 4 evangelists surround him. So right here, these are the symbols of the 4 evangelists, which is also the 4 writers of the Gospels. So remember when we looked at the Lindisfarne Gospels and we saw the winged calf, which was a symbol, I think, of St. Luke, if I'm not mistaken. These are the symbols of those 4 writers of the Gospels. On the lintel below, so on this section, there are figures of the 12 apostles or 12 disciples. Those are the 12 official followers of Jesus during his lifetime, and that's recorded in the Bible. This group suggests the second coming of Jesus or the future. So in the Bible, it says like Jesus is going to come back and like reign over the earth, and all these other things are going to happen. All right, let's go to the left tympanum. So on the left, Christ is pictured before he came to earth. I think I have a better image of this. So Christ is pictured before he came to earth. He's surrounded by 4 angels. So this is Christ like when he's still up in heaven and he hadn't been born yet as a person. Below on the lintel are sculptures of Old Testament prophets, these guys down here. This symbolizes that the prophets can see Christ's future coming, but not entirely clearly. So in the Old Testament, there are lots of prophets who kind of like predict the coming of a Messiah, and that's what this is referencing. All right, there's the center one again. And the right tympanum, in the center of this one is the Virgin Mary as the throne of wisdom. So Mary is seated on a throne like a queen. She even has a crown on. And then she has her child, Jesus, on her lap. The idea of Mary as the throne of wisdom is like that Mary was this very holy figure who like had a lot of wisdom and could really like see what was going on, even as other people didn't really understand like who Jesus was and why he was on earth. So below, we have different scenes from Mary's life. So we have the angel Gabriel visiting her. She actually, in the Bible, it talks about her. Let me see if I can go back to that one, make it a little bit easier to see. In the Bible, it talks about the angel Gabriel coming to see her and telling her that she's going to become pregnant with Jesus. Then she went to visit her cousin Elizabeth. So in the Bible, she goes to visit her cousin Elizabeth, and she's like one of the first people to know that Mary is pregnant. We also see the birth of Jesus and the visit of the shepherds. So down here, Jesus is being born. The shepherds are coming to see the baby Jesus. It also shows Jesus being presented to the priests in the temple, and Mary again as the throne of wisdom. So down here are stories from Mary's life. So like here's Mary with the angel, stories from her life. Okay, now on the sides of the doors, so these are called jamb statues. And jamb is referencing the fact that it's like on the door jamb or the sides of the door. So the statues, you can see they're angled a little bit inward on either side of the door. The statues include figures of prophets and kings and queens of the Old Testament. Now, one of the things that is that other tie to royalty here is that the kings and queens of the Old Testament were made to look like modern day kings and queens of France. So they wanted to associate themselves again with that like ultimate authority from God by associating themselves with these Old Testament figures. It gives a space to describe the statues. So I would describe them as they're somewhat naturalistic, but also they're very like column-like. So even though they have all these folds of drapery, this is not how somebody would really look or how drapery would even really fall. Like there's no movement or dynamism in these figures. They're very like cylindrical. All right, here now we have the inside of the church, and I'm going to show you so you can label, if you wish, where the different parts are, or you can just describe them. Okay, so first of all, let me talk about the piers here. So we have large piers. These are compound piers because they have different elements kind of mushed together to form one giant column. We also have a nave arcade. So we have a series of archways going across. So we have a nave arcade. We also have the rectangular bay or the ribbed vaults. So you can see here, let me see if I have another picture of it. Okay, so remember how we looked at the plan and it had these rectangles that had crisscrosses in them? This is what it looks like if you actually looked at the ceiling. So it's like these rectangle shapes repeating one after the other. And they have vaults rather than in the Church of St. Foy where they just went straight across the ceiling and they were straight barrel vaults. These are what they call ribbed because they cross each other. This also has a clerestory, so it has this raised up section where it has all of these windows to let in light. And it also has what's called a triforium. A triforium is like almost like a second nave arcade. So this area up here is called a triforium, where it's these repeated arches above the nave of a church. So one of the things that I want you to notice here is how much stained glass there is, and also notice how at the same time there is a lot of light that comes in here. So Gothic architects, that's kind of part of their goal, is to allow more light into the churches. Here again, you can see these windows form the clerestory, and this is the triforium, which is the arcade above the first nave arcade. Here's another picture just to give you a different perspective. So this one is looking at the apse here, and here's the altar down here. This part here, you don't have to record that, but this is called the choir, and that's where the choir would be in the church. And then this part here, if we could like walk back here and turn, we would see that this is the transept, or the part that goes across. And so back here are the side aisles. So if we wanted to, we could walk all the way behind these pillars, and we could even go all the way behind the apse in the ambulatory and see the radiating chapels. And this, I think, is just a pretty cool picture. A lot of times when we look at some of these old churches, we see them as extremely like dark. The reason they've partially become that way is because there's so much, like, throughout history, people have used candles and incense and all this stuff in here. And so it's covered with soot and dirt. And so this is a picture of Chartres when it's undergone a restoration. And so this part here you can see is still really dirty and dark. And then this is after they've cleaned it, like maybe more what it might have really looked like. And here's another picture of that. Another term I'll just remind you of that we talked about on the first slide is these windows that are tall and pointed are called lancet windows. And they have here what they're calling an oculus, or like a round window above them. So throughout Chartres Cathedral, there are different stained glass windows. Here's two pictures of two different rose windows. The rose window is like the huge round section. And then you can see on this one, there's lancet windows under it. So let's talk about why architects use this, and why in the Middle Ages did they want to use this. So the goal of Gothic architects was to open up the interior, give it more light, and make it feel like more of an open space. One of the ways that they wanted to do this was through the use of obviously more windows. And so in this case, they used a lot of stained glass. Stained glass was not necessarily supposed to give more light, but it was more important to them what the message was. So stained glass was supposed to give them a sense of awe, and even a lot of times we say like a sense of the divine. So people are supposed to walk in here, and remember this is like the 1100s, 1200s, and just be totally in awe and attribute that to God, like be totally just in awe of God's power on earth. So let's talk about the stained glass windows that we see here. The one that's a required image for College Board is this one, and this is called Mary on the Throne of Wisdom. So here again, like we saw on the outside, we have Mary. She's seated on a throne. She's wearing a crown as if she's like the Queen of Heaven, and she has Jesus on her lap. So the idea here is almost like that this heavenly person is from where the light originates, because the light is coming through the window, and like that heaven is the source of all light. The other role that stained glass windows played is that most people were illiterate in Europe at this time, and so having visuals of religious figures or biblical stories was important to teach people. The blue here, we learned about lapis lazuli earlier in the year. Blue is a very, very expensive pigment. So the fact that there's so much blue here really shows how just impressive this church was. And also it was a lot of the money was given by the kings and queens. So they wanted to kind of show off their power. The red around Mary symbolizes Christ's blood when he died on the cross. And the crown and the throne is just another way for the kings and queens of France to kind of justify their own power. So some of these windows, for example, were commissioned by Blanche of Castile, who was the Queen of France at the time. And she did that to show their power. So like, I'm going to switch to this one. The symbol of France is the fleur-de-lis, which is included on some of these windows. And the yellow and blue were like kind of the colors of the monarchy in France. And so she included a lot of those symbols in the rose windows that she sponsored to associate the power of the French monarchy with the power of these biblical figures. So the goal of the stained glass is that people should have a sense of the divine, and they should really feel like the presence of God when they come in here. Mary in particular, a lot of people who were Christian in Europe at the time were very, very devoted to the Virgin Mary, and we call it a cult of the Virgin Mary, but I feel like cult today has a negative connotation. It just means people were very, very devoted to Mary and like prayed to Mary, and this was a great figure of devotion, why they would want to have a window like this. All right. So that is an overview of Chartres Cathedral. Be sure to contact me if you have any questions, and I will see you soon.